All right, let's talk about Paris. When you picture Paris, you probably think of the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre Pyramid, Notre Dame, elegant, historic, beautiful buildings. But then, right in the historic heart of the city, you stumble upon this thing. A chaotic explosion of colorful pipes, exposed steel beams, and a giant glass caterpillar of an escalator crawling up its side. This is the Centre Pompidou, and it's one of the most wonderfully disruptive, controversial, and influential buildings of the entire 20th century. Today, we're going to figure out how on earth this inside-out machine ever got built.
There's really no better way to start than with this quote from one of its architects, Renzo. He just nails it. This isn't the sleek, minimalist spaceship from a modern sci-fi movie. No, this is something much weirder, much more whimsical. It's a steampunk creation, all gears and pistons and visible workings. The quote, "one that would never fly," is key. It tells you that this building isn't about a cold, efficient future. It's a playful parody of technology. It's a joke, a gesture, a piece of art that looks like a machine. So the question remains, why? Why this building, in this place, at this time?
To really get the Centre Pompidou, you have to understand that it wasn't born in a quiet architect's studio. It was forged in the fires of social and political revolution. We have to rewind the clock back to 1968. Paris was a city on the edge, and French society was at a breaking point. The story of this building is really the story of a country in crisis.
And just look how quickly everything spiraled out of control. It started, as these things so often do, with student protests. They were angry about the Vietnam War, about the rigid, old-fashioned university system, but when the police were sent in to clear them out, it was like throwing gasoline on a bonfire. The movement exploded. It wasn't just students anymore. Workers across the country joined in solidarity. By mid-May, more than 10 million people were on strike. The entire country just stopped. The protests were against everything the establishment stood for: capitalism, authority, tradition. And for a moment, it really looked like the government was going to collapse. The president literally fled the city. This wasn't just a protest. It was a profound crisis of confidence that shook France to its very core.
This famous line from President Charles de Gaulle just perfectly captures the attitude of the establishment. He's saying, reform? Sure, we can talk about reform. But this chaos in the streets? No. And that word he uses, chianglit, is just fantastic. It's an old, very French word that doesn't have a perfect English translation. It means something like a masquerade, a messy carnival, a total shambles. He's completely dismissing the protests as childish disorder. And in doing so, he reveals this huge, unbridgeable gap between the old guard and a new generation that was desperate for change.
So after all that turmoil, de Gaulle eventually resigned. His successor, Georges Pompidou, looked at this deeply wounded, divided nation and had a pretty audacious idea. How do you heal a country? How do you restore national pride? His answer wasn't politics, it was culture. He decided that what France needed was a bold, new, forward-looking cultural center. Something that could act as a symbol of a new, more open France. And, not so subtly, it was also about putting Paris back on top. New York was starting to steal the title of the world's art capital, and Pompidou wanted to reclaim it for France.
Okay, so the stage is set. President Pompidou needs a building that can heal a nation. No pressure, right? To find the right design, he launches a massive international competition. Anyone from anywhere could submit an idea. And the proposal they ended up choosing, well, let's just say nobody saw it coming. It was a complete and utter shock to the architectural world.
Out of almost 700 entries, the winners were not some famous established masters of architecture. Nope, they were these two guys, Renzo and Richard Rogers. They were in their 30s, they were relative unknowns. They were the ultimate underdogs. One historian called them jesters because their proposal seemed like a joke. But their radical, anti-establishment, almost anarchic vision was perfectly in sync with the revolutionary spirit of 1968. They were the right architects at the right time.
And this chart really breaks down just how revolutionary their idea was. Think about the traditional museum. You know the type. A big, intimidating marble box. It feels like a temple or a palace. It's elitist, it's stuffy, you feel like you have to whisper. Pieter and Rogers wanted to blow that all up. Their vision was the complete opposite. A playful machine for people. Not intimidating, but open and accessible to everyone. Not a static monument to the past, but a dynamic living center for information, creativity, and fun. They weren't just designing a building. They were launching an attack on the very idea of what a cultural institution should be.
This whole philosophy has a name, and it's called anti-monumentalism. The goal was to create the absolute opposite of a fixed, permanent, imposing monument. They wanted a building that felt alive, that could change and adapt over time. They called it a university of the streets. I love that phrase. It's the idea that culture shouldn't be locked away in an ivory tower. It should be down on the street, messy, accessible, and part of the chaotic, beautiful flow of everyday life.
So, that's the dream. But how do you actually build it? How do you make a building that's totally flexible? This is their stroke of genius, the single big idea that changes everything. You turn the building inside out. It's that simple and that radical. You take all the stuff that normally clutters up an interior, the steel skeleton, the plumbing, the air conditioning ducts, the elevators, the stairs, and you just stick it all on the outside for everyone to see. And why do that? Because it leaves the inside completely empty, just vast open floors with no columns or walls in the way. It's a blank canvas. It can be a library, an art gallery, a cinema, a performance space. It can be anything you want it to be.
Okay, so the idea is brilliant, but an idea is one thing. Actually building this inside-out monster is another. This was an absolutely incredible feat of engineering. So let's pop the hood and take a look at the nuts and bolts of how this incredible machine was actually put together.
Now, if there's one unsung hero of this entire structure, it's this piece of metal right here, the gerberet. It looks incredibly futuristic, like a part from a spaceship. But here's the wild part. It's not new technology at all. It's based on a design by a German bridge engineer from the 1800s. Essentially, it acts as a giant lever or a hinge. It's the piece that connects the main vertical columns to the enormous 45-meter-long horizontal trusses that span the building. It's the critical component that lets them hang the floors from the exterior frame, making the whole inside-out concept possible. It's old tech used in a brilliantly new way.
And of course, you can't talk about the Pompidou without mentioning the famous color code. This wasn't just them trying to make it look bright and cheerful. This was a radical act of honesty. They wanted to make the building's functions, its veins and arteries, completely legible to anyone who looked at it. Blue is for air, the building's lungs. Yellow is for electricity, its nervous system. Green is for water. And most famously, red is for people, the elevators and that iconic external escalator. Red is the color of circulation, the lifeblood of the building, and they put it right out front.
Adding to that machine-like feel is the way it was constructed. This wasn't built brick by brick in the traditional way. It was assembled. The massive steel components, like the gerberets and the trusses, were cast with incredible precision in factories in Germany. Then, they were shipped to the site in Paris and bolted together, piece by piece, like a giant, highly sophisticated Meccano set. It's this amazing paradox, a building that looks like a rough, industrial machine, but was actually built with the precision and craft of a handmade watch.
So, the machine is built. It's standing there in all its colorful, chaotic glory right in the heart of Paris. The critics, as you can imagine, went ballistic. They called it an oil refinery, an ocean liner, an architectural King Kong. They were horrified. But Piano and Rogers weren't designing it for the critics. They were designing it for the people. So what did the public think? And what did this anti-monument ultimately become?
Well, the public success was immediate, and it was absolutely overwhelming. The planners had cautiously hoped for maybe 10,000 visitors a day. On opening day and every day after, they were getting 25,000. People flocked to it. They didn't see an oil refinery. They saw a public living room, a playground. They loved the sloping public plaza in front of the building, which became an impromptu stage for street performers. And riding that external escalator, floating up the side of the building in a glass tube with the whole of Paris spread out before you, it instantly became one of the city's most beloved experiences. The Pompidou wasn't just a building, it was an event.
And this brings us back to the great central paradox of the Centre Pompidou. This building became the poster child for a style of architecture called high-tech. But in the minds of its own creators, it was a parody of that idea. They weren't sincerely celebrating technology for its own sake. They were using the language of industry, the exposed steel, the functional pipes, in a playful, subversive, almost funny way. They were showing that a building made of machine parts could still be deeply human, crafted by hand, and dedicated to the joyful, messy business of culture.
So that leaves us with this final, fascinating question. The Centre Pompidou was born from a desire to reject monuments, to create something flexible, changeable, and humble. And yet, through its radical honesty, its playful spirit, and its overwhelming embrace by the public, it became one of the most recognizable and important monuments in all of Paris. It's a beautiful contradiction that proves architecture, at its very best, is always full of surprises. This idea that design can completely upend our expectations and change how we experience a city is exactly the kind of thing we love digging into here. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please make sure you hit that subscribe button for the Just Necessary Design YouTube channel so you don't miss what we explore next. We believe these conversations aren't over yet. And hey, if you want to go even deeper, we've put together some free documents and extra resources about the Pompidou. You can find the link for that right below in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.